Roswell, New Mexico may be a town you've heard of. It's most famously known as the site of a supposed 1947 UFO crash. The town has since become something of a mecca for believers of the supernatural, who come from all over the world to learn more about the incident and to explore the surrounding area for themselves. There's no doubt that something strange happened in Roswell in 1947, but the true nature of the event is still completely shrouded in mystery. Was it a UFO crash? A government cover-up? Or something even more sinister? But aside from this more famous incident, Roswell is also home to Bottomless Lakes State Park, New Mexico's first state park, established in 1933, and a park with a supernatural history all of its own. The park gets its name from 9 small lakes that were formed when underground salt beds collapsed. The lakes range in depth from 18 to 90 feet, and one in particular is popular with divers, canoers, and swimmers alike. Although anybody can visit the lakes, there's only one that permits swimming. It has a surface area of about 15 acres, but it plummets to depths of 90 feet. Making it perfect for scuba divers. The greenish-blue color that shines from the waters is created by aquatic plants, and it's that gives the lakes the illusion of being bottomless. But be careful. Despite its beauty, local legends tell of objects going missing in the lakes, only to wash up later in the Carlsbad Caverns or even the Gulf of Mexico. Other locals warn of strong underwater currents that suck up swimmers and divers, never to be seen again. There are even some who tell stories about a giant turtle monster who patrols the bottom of the lake. Additionally, Bottomless Lakes has had its fair share of tragic events over the years. In fact, there have been numerous reports of visitors getting lost or even fatally injured while exploring the area, including a 22-year-old man who died after jumping off the sheer cliffs of Devil's Inkwell and into the lake. Jennifer, a park ranger working at the Santa Fe National Historic Trail in Santa Fe, visited Bottomless Lakes State Park in May of 2016. She was drawn to take the 3-hour drive south and visit because of the area's supernatural history, and to see if she could find any evidence of the strange events that have been reported there. She was very interested in the supernatural and had always been fascinated by the incident in Roswell, which is what first attracted her to learning more about the area. She was even hoping that her job as a park ranger would gain her access to areas that most people would not be able to get to, and she was hoping to find some real, concrete answers. Specifically, she was interested in the eyewitness accounts of visitors who reported seeing a human-like creature wandering around the park late at night. These stories always intrigued her, and she was hoping to get a glimpse of this creature for herself, or find some sort of evidence that it really exists. When Jennifer arrived at Bottomless Lakes, she was immediately struck by what she felt was an eerie atmosphere. She had never felt anything like it before, and she hadn't been expecting to feel that way at all. She parked at Devil's Inkwell campground and got out of her car and began walking around, trying to get a feel for the place and shake her unease. There were 4 lakes all within a half a mile or so of the campground, and so she started off. She didn't have to walk long before she came to Figure 8 Lake. The lake was eerily still, and the water looked incredibly deep and dark. She couldn't see the bottom no matter how hard she tried. This intensified the uneasy feeling she had about the place. She wandered around a bit, trying to see if anything seemed strange or otherwise out of place. Based on her park ranger training, nothing stood out, so she decided to move on and hiked over to the next lake. The second lake she came to was Devil's Inkwell. It was much the same as the first, but smaller, with sheer cliffs on its sides. It was deep and still, with no signs of life anywhere. She figured the heat of the day may have just had everything at a standstill. Here, she tried to pinpoint the source of her feelings, trying to figure out what was off, and soon she began to feel like she was being watched. She watched people for a while, but she couldn't see anyone staring at her. She decided to just keep moving along. And then at the third lake, Mirror Lake, it was when Jennifer started to feel really uneasy, to the point that her body was actually trembling. The hair on the back of her neck was now standing up, too, and she still had this overwhelming feeling that someone was watching her. She turned around slowly, but still saw nothing. And then as she tried to shake off the feeling, she just continued to the next lake, to the north. This one was a bit further away from the first three, Cottonwood Lake. Along the way to Cottonwood Lake, Jennifer finally saw what she was sure was the source of her uneasiness. But she wasn't sure what it was at first, because it was still too far away, and it wasn't on the trail, but rather coming towards her from the east side of the lake, across the open land. But she could definitely see a figure moving towards her, focused on her. But the rules were that you weren't allowed off of the trails. She froze, not knowing what to do and who would be out there. The figure kept coming closer, and she could see that it was definitely human-like and walking on hind legs. But it wasn't until it was about a few dozen feet away from her that she realized that it wasn't a human at all. It was some kind of creature that she had never seen before. The creature was taller than a human. It had long, thick limbs covered in fur. Its eyes were black, and its mouth was open in what looked like a silent scream. As it got closer, she could tell that it smelled like rotting flesh and death. Jennifer was paralyzed with fear, and she couldn't move or speak or even yell for help. She could only watch as the creature came closer and closer to her. It finally got close enough and reached out one of its long, furry arms and swiped at her. She jumped back, finally breaking out of her paralysis, and ran as fast as she could, the less than half-mile back to her car. She didn't look back until she was safely inside it with the doors locked. When she did look back, the creature was gone. She sat in her car for a long time, trying to process what she had just seen. She was shaken, terrified, but she knew that she had to tell someone what she had seen. She needed to get it off her chest. So she called her boss, who also happened to be a close friend. She was hoping he would have some insight, since he had worked in New Mexico parks much longer than she had. Her boss listened, and he believed her story, but he had no further information to give her as to what it could have been. However, he too was intrigued enough that he put her in touch with a local newspaper reporter that he knew, who was also interested in the supernatural history of the area. The reporter named Helen was instantly on board, and together the girls decided to go back to Bottomless Lake State Park to see if they could find any evidence of that creature. They made a plan to return the next week and look into things. On the way there, they stopped in Roswell to get some supplies. Jennifer got a notebook and a pen to take notes, hoping to come away with some answers. When they arrived back at Bottomless Lakes that next week, they went straight to Figure 8 Lake, where Jen had originally started her walk the previous week. They didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but the reporter also felt the same sense of being watched that Jen had felt. And then at Devil's Inkwell, they found some footprints that looked like they could have been made by the creature. They followed the footprints, but they eventually lost them in the dry and dusty terrain. They searched around for a while longer, but they didn't find anything else. So they decided to continue on to Mirror Lake next. When they got there, it was almost instantaneous. They looked up, and there it was, with a look on its face as if it had been watching them the entire time. An almost smug look. It was standing on the other side of the lake watching them. They tried to get closer, but it ran off. They followed after it, but they lost sight of it pretty quickly. Having no luck catching up to the thing, they next decided to find some people who worked at the park and interview them about it. 2 workers admitted that it's an unspoken truth that many of them had had encounters and strange sightings at the park, and that some were sure it was a werewolf, but others weren't convinced. Some of the true locals felt that it was a spirit of a Native American who had died long ago, and that it was cursed to roam the earth forever. One of the workers who didn't talk to them initially caught up to them as they walked back to their car and told how they had seen the creature drinking from one of the lakes just earlier that day. The girls headed over to check it out, and when they got there, sure enough, there were tracks leading down to the water's edge. But that was all they found. The two women then decided to go over to Roswell and do some research. They looked through old newspapers, talked to some of the older residents. They learned that there had been reports of a creature like this dating back as far as the early 1800s. Apparently, there have been many sightings of this creature over the years, but no one has been able to get a good look at it or a picture. Some people believe that the creature is harmless and that it is just curious about humans. Others believe that it's dangerous and should be avoided. In the end, Jennifer concluded that Bottomless Lakes State Park is definitely a place with supernatural history. Whether or not the events that have been reported there are actually true, she couldn't say for sure. But she can say that her experiences were real. These strange events only served to add to the mystery of Bottomless Lakes State Park, and it left Jennifer with more questions than answers. What's really going on at the park? Are the stories true? Or is it all just a bunch of nonsense? She's still trying to figure it out. This story from Los Alamos County in New Mexico was reported nearly 12 years ago. The encounter took place on September 6th of 2010. Hi, my name is Joe. I'm 20 years old, and I recently had an encounter that was definitely unexplainable. First, let me start out by telling you the story from the very beginning. I am from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the closest camp spots to me are in the Jemez Mountains. I have a friend who frequents the Jemez Mountains to go hunting and camping. A couple years ago, my buddy told me a story about an encounter he recently had in Jemez. He said that he had recently gone on a camping trip with his Uncle Mike and his family. They went to a spot in Jemez that he called the Meadow. He told me that about an hour before sundown, he and his family were at the camp spot, and they could all hear a huge shrieking sound, approximately 300 or 400 yards away. He told me that the sound had lasted for about 30 seconds to a minute. As he told me this, he asked me the question, "What kind of animal do you know has the lung capacity to hold a call for that amount of time?" He and his family were sitting around the campfire at sundown. He told me he could see the sky, and there was just enough light out to see in between the trees on the ridge. The meadow is in a small valley with 2 ridges on either side of the camp spot. As everyone was sitting around the campfire, he told me that he would look up at the ridge and see something walk upright in between the trees. He told me the being would walk back and forth in between trees until sundown. He said he didn't call attention to the thing because his girlfriend and sisters were camping there, and he didn't want to cause a scare. He and his family go to sleep, but are awakened in the middle of the night to the shrieking sound. Only this time, the shrieking sound is up on one of the ridges. He said the sound was so loud that he could literally feel the bass of the sound. This shriek lasted about 1.5 minutes, as he described it. I was very interested in this, and my friend told me that the spot was originally his Uncle Mike's camp spot from when he was a little kid. I talked to his Uncle Mike about the story. Uncle Mike is a backwoods hunter-camper who has been all over the country to hunt. When I talked to Mike, he was genuinely afraid of the camp spot. He told me that he had been experiencing strange things in this camp spot since he was a young boy. He recalled a time when he was 7, and he was camping with his brother and his mother. He said that whatever was out there scared his mother so bad that she packed camp in the middle of the night and left. He told me he wouldn't go back. My friend and I eventually persuaded him to go camping with us. So last summer, my friend, Uncle Mike, my friend's Uncle Richard, and myself went to the very camp spot where the noises were heard. We stayed 5 nights and heard nothing. There were noises, but nothing definite. Well, about a month ago, I took my girlfriend to the camp spot, and we stayed a few nights and heard nothing. This past weekend was Labor Day, and so I took my girlfriend once again to this camp spot and had a very terrifying, unexplainable experience. The first night was a great night with nothing out of the ordinary. The second night was something else. My friend was camping miles away, so we went and visited him. It was getting dark, so I told my girlfriend that we needed to get back to camp. I drove sort of hastily back to camp, and when we arrived, I started the fire immediately. After I started the fire, my girlfriend and I sat by it, and I felt extremely tense, but I didn't know why. And then this went on for about an hour, until my girlfriend got irritated with me. I told her I just wanted to go to bed. I packed a lot of wood on the fire, and we crawled into the back of my Hummer, and we went to sleep. Now, before I go on, I want to give you a description of the campsite. I was parked facing away from the entrance of the site. There was a canopy directly behind the vehicle. Underneath the canopy was my backpack and the garbage bag that did have some garbage in it. The campfire was about 15 feet away from the canopy with 2 chairs next to it. So we were lying with our heads facing the back of the vehicle, and my girlfriend is to the left of me. We go to sleep in the back of the vehicle. Sometime later, I wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm very groggy. I'm looking up at the ceiling of the vehicle, and I can see a slight glow of the fire, and then it goes out moments later. Immediately after the light goes out, I hear something rub up against the vehicle on my side. I hear it until I can hear it knock over a shovel and 2 fishing poles. My adrenaline starts going fast. I don't wake my girlfriend up, though, because I didn't want to scare her. I listened to this thing for about 10 minutes. It was very dark at this point, and there was no moon out. After about 15 minutes total, I hear the thing rub up against the vehicle again. And at this point, I grab my girlfriend by the back of the neck, and I say in a whispering voice, "I need you to listen to me carefully. There's something outside the Hummer. I don't know what it is. I don't know how big it is, but something is out there, and I'm going to get the gun." She gasps, says okay, and I reach for my 9mm and turn off safety. I lay there clenching my gun and her, and I listen to the thing raise hell outside. I hear what sounds like tearing of cloth, ripping of the trash, and big footsteps and grunts. My girlfriend tells me to calm down because she can feel me trembling. Every time my girlfriend and I hear a noise, though, we clinch each other because we were hearing the same thing. We lie there listening to the noises for what feels like 20 minutes before I can start to calm down at all. At this point, I had accepted the fact that there was a bear outside my vehicle, and it was getting what it was after. The sounds are coming from next to the campfire now. I hear the chairs fall over, and eventually the sounds come close to the vehicle again. A couple of times I would post up on my arm to see if I could figure out what it was, but it's too dark to see anything. The only thing I can make out is the end of the tree line. The sky was just a little brighter than the trees, and I could also see a small glowing of embers from the campfire, but not enough to light anything else up. I couldn't see anything, but the noises continued. I can remember saying to my girlfriend, "Our spot is going to be a mess in the morning." I was trying to calm my girlfriend down because at this point she wanted to leave. Eventually the noises started coming from her side of the vehicle. On that side was the ice chest and the dry box, both full of food. It's tampering with them, and it sounds like it dumped the ice out of the chest. I turned to my girlfriend and I said, "There went the ice chest." These noises continued for probably about 5 minutes, and at this point I was sitting up on my heels looking out the window, but could still see nothing. The next thing I hear is it touches the vehicle, and a second later I hear a clang. The sound was very distinct. It was the sound of the breaking of the canopy hitting the ground. I was looking out the back window and could see the sky now. It had knocked over the canopy. I say to my girlfriend, "Oh my God, it just knocked over the canopy." And in my head, I can picture a bear climbing up onto the bracing of the canopy and collapsing it where it stood. My girlfriend says, "Did you see that thing?" Assuming that she was asking if I could see it, and I said, "No, I can't see anything." And then she starts crying hysterically. but not too loud. She says, "I'm not okay. I want to leave now." And I said, "Okay." I clench my gun as I crawl into the driver's seat. I sit for a couple of seconds before I started the vehicle because I didn't know what would happen when I did. And then I start the vehicle, I head forward, and then I turn right to make a U-turn and drive out of there. I see no kind of animal or living thing. I drive about 10 minutes until I hit the main road. I park there, and my girlfriend is still in the back, crying. I crawled back there with her to console her. We slept a little on the main road until sunrise. And then we both woke about 7:30 in the morning and started talking about it. And it was then that she said, "I saw the thing." I said, "What?" She said, "Don't you remember me saying, 'Did you see it?' And I said, "Yeah." And she went on to tell me that she saw it. Keep in mind, she was lying down the entire time and refused to sit up. She said she was lying down looking up at the sky, which was lighter than everything else. She was looking out the side window, which was where it was at the end. She said as soon as the canopy hit the ground, she saw something black fly past the window. She said it was taller than the top of the window and headed back the direction it had originally come from, which just so happened to be away from all of the main roads. My Hummer's about 6 feet, and if she was lying down looking up and saw something taller than the top of the window, well, whatever it was had to have been 7 feet plus. After our conversation, we agreed to go back up to the camp spot to collect our things, which was the canopy, the chairs, the cooler, the dry box, the shovel, and the fishing poles. Oh, and my backpack in the garbage. We head back up to the camp spot and finally arrive. I was chilled to the bone when we arrived. There was not a thing out of place. There were only 2 things visibly wrong with the camp spot. The chairs were knocked over, and the canopy was turned upside down about 20 feet from where it had been standing. I want you to know that there was no wind that night. Now, if a bear got to this canopy, it would have been collapsed and torn. But what this meant to me was that whatever knocked over my canopy had to have picked it up and then thrown it 20 feet away. I put on my shoes, which I had left there the night before, and started scouring the area. The trash, which was open and not tied the night before, wasn't tampered with. My backpack was right where I left it. The cooler and the dry box were in the exact same spot, and we never really took an inventory of their contents the night prior, so you couldn't exactly tell if anything was missing. This scared the hell out of me, because it meant that whatever was there had the dexterity to rummage through everything and do whatever it did, and then leave it the way it was found. We packed up and left. I want whoever reads this to know that I don't drink and I have never touched drugs. What happened to me that night was not just the wind, but it was very, very real. I've never before in my life felt terror like that, and numerous times through writing to you, I have broken out in tears because I hate to relive it. There are only certain people that I've even told this story to, because I don't want to sound crazy. I really hope I hear from you so I can attempt to make some sense of what I've been through. When I first heard my friends' stories, I didn't doubt them, and they made me very curious. But going there, to the campsite, 3 times and not experiencing anything just made me think whatever it was no longer up there. I know better now. And I'll never return.